Welcome to PolyCast, a Civilization podcast focused on game strategy.
Dan Q.
Makalua.
The Me and Team.
Mad Jin. With guest co-host
Derek Paxton. All across Michigan, who is that? Derek Paxton. Wait, now you can use that line. Oh no, I'm doomed.
I was about to say, do I have the bumper for the episode?
Yep.
Guest, introduce the episode.
Is that to me?
Yeah.
Am I the guest?
Yeah.
Yes.
Introduce the episode. So you have the guy who's like the new guy who isn't familiar.
Whoa.
We do this all the time.
Yeah.
New guy, not familiar, says returning guest
No,
host.
that was Mergen Kale. This is Derek's first time on the show.
This is how Dan gets his jolly, so you just make sure you do the intro.
Really? First time, Derek? You had to say first. Okay, I'll behave. Continue.
Now we have a lot of good editing to go. It's his first time.
Good luck finding
Something.
anything usable in this,
Bleep.
man.
Nope, Dan's just going to put the whole thing up on it, and it's going to be like hours long.
PolyCast episode 229. It's raw!
Thank you, Lord.
Only this episode is rated R or something.
Oh.
Rated G and
Oh, of course.
Welcome to episode 229. Thank you for having me on the show. I'm Derek Paxton. I work at Startup Entertainment. I've been the producer on Galactic Civilizations for the past couple of years, a game that we just released. Joined here today by Mackie,
Hello.
Phil,
Not banned in at least 5 countries.
Dan Quick,
I liked the live stream.
and by Mad Degen. Oh, you give me crap for my horrible introduction, and that's what you have.
Well, I think it's just the fact that he's going, I don't think I pronounced the D other than in the mad.
Oh, I see.
No, it makes sense, because on the last episode, we had Brad Wardell,
Yep.
Stardock founder, chief executive officer, and I did Ribbit for him because one of his online handles is Frogboy. So now we have the equivalent. Okay, so the next time someone from Stardock comes on the show, let them know that they will have an animal noise associated with them.
No, I don't like where this is going already.
You have to assign them names for an animal.
I feel like we have news from Firaxis because, hey, an expansion, just what we've been talking about. Rising
Mackie's working
Tide.
on an expansion?
No, Firaxis. Stuff we couldn't have developed for the first... Okay, finally we get to play around in the ocean.
Yes! I was for certain. I thought Phil was going to say that first, but no, this is why I don't bet. I lose money.
Well, it's like our running joke about these things. Oh, yeah, sure, this didn't make it into the game because you didn't get it done. Sure. We're all cynical about this at this point. The Rising Tide expansion for Beyond Earth. We can now go play in the ocean, like colonize it and things.
Oh, Civbert.
Yes.
Kind of like Qbert, but less fun.
Oh, I don't know.
People are already speculating that there's going to be another expansion for Beyond Earth. I think it should be called Civ Ernie.
Ernie. See what you did there. Colonize the ocean, which is what we've all been asking for a long time to even do in Civ in the late game. Let me colonize in the ocean.
Yeah, so unless we're talking about Call to Power, that ability has eluded us.
Yes, and everybody was kind of surprised when the game first came out. Couldn't do that till the expansion in Alpha Centauri, so actually that makes sense. But everyone's so used to it from Alpha Centauri, so they're like, but why can't I?
That was an
Yeah,
expansion.
it wouldn't make any sense in Civ 5 at all. But in this game, it should be somewhat early so that it's viable to put cities there ever.
Even in Civ 5, you could throw your population into the water. I mean, if you throw enough of them in there, you'll make yourself a little island.
Yeah, that's true. I'm not really sure that's an ocean city, but...
Oh, what I thought you meant was that you could conscript your citizens to become units, and then you could put them in the water and let them be bombarded. That's what I thought you meant, and I was like, wow, morbid, mad, seriously. But I guess that's...
No, you
the
can't do
worker
that.
water defense is actually pretty useful.
Yeah.
I think you're right, though, that will be relatively early on. Would you guys think they're going to have one of the factions start out there?
Probably.
Well, there's 4 new factions. So maybe
Yeah,
we
one
may
of
have
them
to
should
see where
start
one.
out there.
Yeah.
Although we only know a little bit of one of them.
Yeah.
The Middle Eastern themed faction.
Yeah, and that one's probably not the one that's going to start in the water. But
Yeah, that's right. The one that starts in the desert is like, you know what? Screw this. No more desert. Let's go for
Well,
the
hey,
water.
if they give us a new and improved version of the pirates from Alpha Centauri, that would be great.
Yeah, and it says for them, Al-Falah says they're going to arrive on generation ships instead of using the cryogenic sleep available to other factions.
Ooh.
I think that lore's kind of pretty cool because when they arrive on the planet, they will actually have no memory of Earth at all. That the people that are arriving are not the same people that left, unlike everybody else. I think that's kind of a cool twist on that faction. Should be kind of neat. It'd be interesting to see how that plays in the gameplay, though.
yeah, like what they give them versus don't give them as a result of that.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of one of those. Well, that is nice for the lore, but does it?
How's that going to work out in game is the thing.
Yeah. Does it do anything, or is it just pure lore?
Yeah, it's great lore though, certainly.
They had new biome types. We finally get a Hoth world. Yay!
Look at the red planet.
One thing I've always been so impressed with Beyond Earth with, it's so challenging to be able to ride that line. You want something familiar. You don't just want to be playing a game where everything just looks weird to you. So you want it to be familiar enough that you recognize it. It feels like a real world that you're traversing. Yet they can't go the civilization path and have it look just like Earth. This is supposed to be an alien new world. So trying to ride that line between those two is something that Beyond Earth just did so well. And I'm really excited with the screenshots of Rising Tide. It looks like they're getting even better there. Some of the stuff looks
Yeah,
real.
the artwork side has drastically improved. One thing that's always bothered me, and probably a lot of other people, is that, in Civ, base Civ and Beyond Earth at the start, water was, hey look, we kind of blew over this and there's like nothing below that blue. And now with Rising Tide, there's actual continental shells, there's edging in there, there's stuff in it, and it actually looks a lot more realistic / nice than it did before.
And we're going to get marine versions of existing resources as well, as we have seen. So hopefully that artwork will help that pop out on the screen. It's like some of them are easier to see than others, like, floatstone, for example. Oh, okay.
Yeah, for
floating.
Axite.
For Axite, yes.
There's such a challenge there in allowing people to settle in the water because you don't want to create, this is just blue land, right? All this, it's just like land except it's blue and all the same rules apply. So really trying to break that up into, no, there's different things that are happening here. There's advantages and disadvantages to being out in those environments. It'll be cool to see how they do that.
The first time I saw that, immediately the strength of naval units in Beyond Earth came to mind because although they're glass cannons, even early game naval units can just flatten cities and land units if they have the firing initiative. They're just so painful.
Except that they get wrecked by all naval aliens.
I was just about to say.
Yeah, because I'm thinking about that your first city if you decide to put it in the ocean and then here comes all the lurkers. Oh, God.
Yeah.
Sort of. Like, if you have
dragons.
enough of them, you can pretty much one-shot the aliens before they get to move. So
Except if there's enough of them, they have high speed and all melee, so they just have to catch you.
Yeah, pretty much.
And your glass cannon cruisers are at least 2.5 combat strength less powerful.
Yeah.
That was always the thing that annoyed me about those.
And in a couple of interviews, Will Miller and David McDonough, co-lead designers for Civilization Beyond Earth and for Rising Tide, have said that, quote, just about everything has been slightly moved, in some cases significantly moved, in order to account for water gameplay. Will said this to Chris Waters over at GameSpot. So everything's going to happen on one layer. There is no deep sea counterpart to orbital layer, but again, it will be interesting to see, of course, how not just the aquatic gameplay, aquatic cities mesh with, of course, what else we can already do in the ocean, but how that's going to work with what's on land, because they've made it clear, or at least trying to make it clear, look, we're not just copy and pasting the mechanics as is on land to put it in the sea. They're revisiting everything. They talk about resources and tile improvements, units, and aliens have been adapted to make water gameplay viable. So hopefully that concern you had about the water aliens and you had a certain muscle clenching that you don't like to talk about in polite company, hopefully this adapted gameplay will allow you to relax at least a little bit in knowing that you're not going to get the equivalent of a Vita Garian random event from Civilization 4 and you're done.
Yeah, that does sound encouraging, and I think you really had to. I mean, water tiles, as they stand now, don't have a lot of production. They've very limited yields outside of the resources.
We always wanted to put our cities on the water for trade routes and things like that, and sometimes you get good resources off the coast, but in Beyond Earth, it's kind of
Well, on Beyond Earth, it's good for if you bother to waste your time going to Orbital Fabricators, then the water's great because you can put tons and tons and tons of oil in the water because the mechanics for it are a little borky, where you have to have empty tiles to be able to put new resources in it.
The structures, like a lot of the terrain-locked structures, or structures that are more or less useful terrain, that'll be interesting with the water. I'm just curious to see how they implement it to make it viable, but also not too far in front of or behind a land setup. The diversity on land is just much better.
In addition to the new marine units, there are, of course, going to be new special hybrid affinity units and upgrades, because now you can have hybrid affinities.
Yay!
My response to that was, I thought I was already doing that when I took, I would take so many levels in one and so many levels in the other.
Yeah, but they didn't have any synergy between each other.
So you're saying there are units out there that you would have to be partway in one, partway in the other before you can unlock that unit?
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
That's the assumption.
Official press release on the official website, civilization.com. I bet you didn't know that. What? By investing in multiple affinities rather than specializing in just one, players can unlock special hybrid affinity units and upgrades. And in some cases, to me, that's, more reason to invest in multiple affinities, because sometimes you think, I'm going to go with this particular affinity, and then you end up with, revealing of an artifact, and it's like, hey, we've given you a level in this other affinity. Oh, I was looking for purity, but that's supremacy. Okay, you know what, I'll go with that. But now it can be purposeful as opposed to incidental, to hybrid yourself.
But hey, artifacts. There's actually now artifacts.
Ooh, a new artifact system.
Yes, collect and combine powerful relics to unlock new perks, unit upgrades, and buildings for your faction. Ooh.
Fight other people for them.
Yeah, you know that's going to happen.
Yep.
It's just like when you Civ 5 with archaeology.
Wow, it almost sounds like realism. Oh, wait.
Well, if you want to get away from that a little bit, or maybe towards it, depending on how it's implemented, there's also dynamic leader traits.
That's one I'm really excited for. I think that sounds kind of cool, just to be able to shake up the game a little bit. You know, if I'm playing the game for my 10th time, I want it to be different than the other 9 times I played, and having these kind of things come in and give me traits as I go through sounds like it could be interesting.
Well, I think the game would be different even the 10th time you played a particular faction based on the other factions on the map and the map type and where you're located, etc. But this adds another layer of taking the randomize your personalities option that we have seen in some Civ games and making it a bit more purposeful rather than incidental, because randomize can sometimes just be crazy out there.
Crazy talk.
Well, yeah, whereas this time it might actually have something to do with how the game is unfolding. What?
Well, I mean, I don't think we know too much about the system at the moment, but they say they want to add to the new diplomacy system, which is now governed by the new fear and respect attributes. Haha. But yeah, it sounds like they're trying to do some effort to fix the utterly broken diplomacy system.
It certainly needs it.
Chris Waters for GameSpot, based on what producer Andrew Fredrickson had said about the description of these traits, which was, an example. You might have a leader who has a trait that favors diplomacy and energy, and then as they move on, they get backed into a corner, so they start swapping out their trait to become more aggressive and militaristic. And Waters sees this as perhaps a more flexible version of policies from Civilization 5. So traits are meant to be managed more actively. So they come with the unique perks and benefits for your civilization, like we were talking about, and tangible in-game benefits. And they also fuel different kinds of diplomatic interactions. So maybe an MP, there might actually be an advantage to having some kind of diplomatic interaction, even in a let's kill everybody, kill or be killed. The development team wants to extend your diplomatic dealing beyond war, peace, and trade agreements, and having complementary traits will be a big factor in determining your options with a given leader. And when I read that description, I do think of policies, but I even think of more of ideologies from Civilization 5 Brave New World. In terms of the diplomacy, it's like, oh, hey, you've adopted order and so have I. Let's work on our 5-year plans together. Or, oh, you chose freedom and I'm order, so I guess we maybe can't be quite as friendly as we once used to be anymore.
Or here, listeners, Dan does not like it if you pick freedom.
He does not like freedom.
Or it sounds like the civics from Civilization 4, right? And then they did all those things there where, they had a preferred civic, and if you were following the civic that they liked, they would like you better and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But you could switch them dynamically, so you could respond to how the game was going.
But it was only within its own little boxes, right? So
correct. Yeah, there's those 5 categories, and you can pick one of the 5. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's a question of, did they go that route, where you have sections, or is it more generalistic, where it's just like you have, okay, here's all your options, and you have X boxes, so, can you overload in one side or the other?
It sounds like your boxes are going to be dictated by your choices and relationships with the other nations, so you would only be able to pick things based on the game state, what you've chosen to do.
Fredrickson did comment that one influence was Crusader Kings 2.
Uh-oh.
Hayden Digman for PC World had remarked to Fredrickson that what you're describing sounds like Crusader Kings 2, but it's one influence, but we didn't take perhaps the direction they did. It's a combination of determining what the leader's character is in an AI sense, what they're actively going to do with their own civ, and what their entry points are for you to make deals, and then from your own side.
Yeah, I mean, they aren't dynamic traits that you can switch out in Crusader Kings 2. You have stats and stuff, but...
There are traits assigned to leaders, to rulers, and you can get or lose traits based on what you choose to do in the game.
Yeah.
Even something simple like you're scarred. You get like wounded and scarred, and that becomes a quote-unquote trait. Yeah. But there's some much more significant ones that you can effectively earn pretty consistently. They have some really lulzy stuff in Crusader Kings. And, if you're going to copy one game from that company, it makes sense to do Crusader Kings because of the questionable epics that you can do in CK2 and in Beyond Earth or even Alpha Centauri. Like, this would be the patch then to bring back nerve stapling.
I think it was a few episodes ago I had made the comment in the introduction. I said, 2K, you haven't made any announcements where the timing was off for us to discuss it on the show. It'd be really nice if you could get back to not coordinating with us. And they listened because 2 days after we recorded the last episode, Rising Tide was announced. All we knew when we recorded the last episode was that it was a special Monday episode of a Firaxis livestream. And that's how it was announced.
Special episode, quote unquote.
Quote unquote.
In the vastness of space, from your homeworld to the farthest stars, who are you?
On Galactic Civilizations 3. Now, Derek, you probably know this, but we have only on very rare occasion, and by rare occasion I mean I think like once in the first season, talked about Galactic Civilizations on this show. So I'm going to do a very compressed primer of it, mostly for our audience, because they might be saying, wait, Galactic Civilizations 3, does that mean there was a 1 and 2? Yes. Yes, there was. I know on the last episode, Brad's talked about Galactic Civilization 6.
Great.
But anyways, Galactic Civilizations 3, yes, it's one of these explore, expand, exploit, and exterminate, or 4X turn-based strategy games from Stardock. It's a sequel to Galactic Civilizations 2 Dreadlords in 2006. In 2003, Stardock released Galactic Civilizations for the PC, which was a remake from the original in 1993 on this OS2 platform that
OS2.
Sadly has now gone on to greener pastures. Is that a polite way of putting it?
Dead, Jim.
Thank you, Bones. It and Dreadlords, followed 3 years later, was praised by reviewers at 1UP and Eurogamer respectively, who saw the game as a replacement for the Master of Orion series, Mu 3, which was released in 2003. That was widely panned by gaming critics and players alike. And the reason I even mention Master of Orion, it's kind of like when you talk about another certain third installment in a particular gaming series. I'm not even going to mention it. I do not want the hate mail. Actually, you know what's funny, Mackie? I was referring to a completely other gaming franchise where the third one, people were kind of annoyed with how this particular trilogy ended. And I know you didn't like it either, but I'm not going to...
that.
Yeah.
That's blue and green, huh?
That kind of level of what the... The reason I mentioned Master of Orion at all, not to cause people pain, was because the term 4X, as near as I've been able to gather, it originated in a 1993 preview of Master of Orion in Computer Gaming World by Alan Emmerich, who went on to be a part of Master of Orion 3, actually, in which he rated the game 4X as a pun on the triple X rating for porn.
I didn't know that. That's great.
You should let Brad know, Derek. You really should market Galactic Civ 3 as space porn. You get a lot more interest.
Porn in space.
Might not be the kind of interest you want, but you will definitely get interest.
Why have it a marketing budget when you could have the news agencies and do it for free?
Some games do that. I mean, whatever.
We've known about Galactic Civilizations 3 since 15th of October 2003. A pre-release was made available through Steam last March, and the full game was released on May 14th, 2015.
We put out our second patch. We have our patch 1.01. We have 1.02 out as an opt-in. So one thing that's been fantastic for us is we can put a patch out into the community for a little while so they can try it out. They can give us feedback on it for those people that want to. If they do run into any issue with a patch that is upsetting their games, they can roll back and switch back to the old version, and they can allow us to help make sure it's bulletproof before we switch it out to everybody in the community.
And I think for people of our audience as well, and I don't know about Magin, Mackie, and Phil's questions, but mine I'm going to, in most cases, draw back to either Civilization 5, Alpha Centauri a little bit, or in particular, and tying into our most previous topic, Civilization Beyond Earth and Civilization Rising Tide. In his review of GalCiv 3, PC Gamer's Richard Corbett says, Beyond Earth is inherently a shorter proposition, meaning that while tomorrow might be great, it's today that really counts. GalCiv 3 feels like the game with its sights set on tomorrow, preparing the grounds for expansions and updates and new features in a way that only a company with Stardock's past form can make feel exciting. First off, no pressure.
No pressure.
My first question is, on the official GalCiv 3 website, the game is described, that being, of course, GalCiv 3, the largest strategy sandbox ever made. What do you mean by that?
So one of the things we did when we were starting GalCiv 3 to accomplish that was we created our own engine for it, and that engine was 64-bit only. So we've had 64-bit computers for a while, 64-bit operating systems, but we're still playing games that are playable on 32-bit systems, which means the entire budget that the designer has to work with has to fit in that 2 gig memory footprint. He cannot design outside of those boundaries. Well, for GalCiv 3, I think it's the second game on Steam. As far as I know, it's the second game on Steam that is 64-bit only.
Yeah,
other games
Star Drive 2 beat you by
No, that's not true. No, the other game, I don't remember the name of it, but it was some searching for a polite term. It's another game. It's not a 4X game.
Searching for a polite term.
Somebody put a POS on Steam to beat so they could say they were first.
No, the difference is that Star Drive is playable on 32-bit and 64-bit. Yes, they absolutely, and there's lots of games that you can play in a 64-bit mode. But the designer can't take advantage of all of that memory out there. So you say, listen, 8 gig of memory, 10 gig of memory, 12 gig of memory. He can't take advantage of that because he still knows this game still has to be playable for somebody who's just running it as a 32-bit application that has access to just 2 gig of RAM. So yes, it's great that there's a 64-bit version and a 32-bit version of those other games, but they're not doing it. So for GalCiv, what we said was, we are going to be 64-bit only. All of those restrictions from having to be playable on a 32-bit environment, we're leaving those behind. We're not going to be constrained by any of that, unlike Star Drive and all the other games that are out there. What that means is we can have 100 players in a game. So I set up a game, me against 99 AIs, and I can play that game. It means that the size of the universe that you're exploring is huge. There's 432,000 tiles in the largest map size in GalCiv 3, something that would have been inconceivable for us on earlier versions of GalCiv or in any kind of 32-bit engine. The base for what we're going to do with GalCiv in the future. So now that we started off with 64-bit, now we have such growth potential for that franchise. And I think that's a little bit what the reviewer was talking about, to add content to it forever.
Yeah, that's the one big nice thing. Leaving 32-bit gaming behind is important. It just makes no sense anymore.
So was it that, for example, when you were looking at the initial design for GalCiv 3, you were thinking, we want to do this with GalCiv 3, but we can't do it if we're also supporting 32-bit system? Or was it more, whatever we want to do with GalCiv 3, we want it to be 64-bit only? So you kind of decided after the fact, or as you went along, how you would end up using that memory, not just to use up that memory, but something that was purposeful and specific to gameplay?
We always wanted to do just 64. We've been fighting with the amount of memory that we have available to us. It has constrained our ability to design games for a long time. So we've always wanted to leave that barrier behind and go on. This was the first point when we started making GalCiv 3 a couple years ago, where we said, listen, by 2015, when this ships, we feel like the market is going to be there. There will still be a percentage of people that can't buy and play our games because they're running on a 32-bit operating system. We understand that. We will lose those customers, but it will be viable for us to release it there. We'll still get good sales. That'll be the majority of the market will be on 64-bit. And then since we are planning on this being a property that we're going to continue expanding and working with for years afterwards as we go on, the game is just going to get better and better. So we needed the market to kind of get there so that we could build the game that we've always wanted to build. And that's the point that we finally come to.
And that any customers that you would lose by still being being in a 32-bit environment would be more than offset by those who would now perhaps pick up your game because it is making use of 64-bit, as opposed to just, well, of course it'll run a 64-bit system, but it's not taking advantage of that. You're going to be able to capitalize on that in the marketing and in the industry and say, look, we're actually making use of this, whereas other games support 64-bit, but they weren't designed for it.
Absolutely. Yes, that's correct.
And on top of that, on the technical aspect, the multi-core, actually using multiple cores.
Yeah, and so we could, now that you do have multiple CPUs in your computers, being able to farm out and thread all of the AI activity, especially for all of those players. So one of the big problems that a lot of games have had, or that we've had in the past too, is it's great to say you can have 100 AI players in your game until you hit intern. Might as well go fix yourself a meal waiting for it to come back. But Brad in particular is amazing at threading. So being able to thread all that work across all those CPUs so that all of those turns can be processing all at once from the AI and then come back to you in a reasonable time period so you can legitimately play those games was a big deal for us and one of the reasons that we were able to do that now. The customer base, we've really been surprised to see that growth has happened even faster than we expected it to when we initially started this project. So that hasn't been a big hindrance. The bigger problem for us has been that the support tools aren't in place to support 64-bit applications yet. Because like I say, we're the second game on Steam, I believe, which means Steam doesn't have any kind of exception reporting, crash reporting for 64-bit apps. We really relied on that for our former games. If anybody crashes on any of our games like Fallen Enchantress, Steam gathers that information and we can go look at it and we can say, okay, listen, 40% of our crashes are coming from this issue, 20% are from here, 3% are here. We can see all those issues. None of that exists for 64-bit applications yet. We're having to write our own systems to do that. So those kind of new things that we're going to have to create on our side to be able to support these projects. So those are a little cutting edge right now.
So you're looking to pioneer the bugs that are 64-bit system only.
Yeah. So we're kind of on a little bit closer to the cutting edge than Stardock is used to because we're not usually tech innovative. In this case, we are kind of pushing those boundaries a little bit.
Now, my next question has to do with going from squares to hexes. Like Civilization 4 to Civilization 5, you move from squares and Galactic Civilization 2 Dreadlords to hexes and Galciv 3. Why did you do that?
It was so funny because probably people get very passionate about it. There's people that get very passionate about it here at Stardock, and we went back and forth on that all over the place. The big contentions from either camp here tended to be the people that like squares felt like hexes were more wargamer-ish. They just felt like more of a hardcore game and did feel as friendly to a more casual gamer than squares. The people that really liked hexes on the hex side really enjoyed the fact that it was equidistant from all points. So if I'm going to be able to move 3 tiles in a hex world, that's exactly the same distance no matter which way I go. In a squares world, if I go 3 diagonal, I've now covered a lot more distance than if I just gone 3 up and down or left and right. So the truth in what you're showing seems to be a lot better.
And wouldn't that work better with the casuals? I mean, just from a logical perspective, if on a hex grid you move on the hex direction towards one of the diagonals, then that is more intuitive than being able to go through the diagonals on squares.
I think casuals are used to checkers and chess and those kind of games, so they say one space is one space. It's entirely a cosmetic and kind of an emotional feel for it when you see that laid out there. We also felt like hexes better gave a natural shape to things. I think you can definitely see this from Civ 4 to Civ 5. The mountain ranges, the rivers, the coastlines look a lot more organic on a hex map than they do on a square map, where the square doesn't look like something you'd actually see in nature, so it looks a little bit inauthentic. And we liked that, especially when we were modeling out in Galciv. We're modeling out planets, solar systems, entire universes, big spiral galaxies, and the hex shape for the curved layout of asteroid belts and things like that looked a lot more organic and real.
So those were the things that you saw, again, from people who were in the hex camp that convinced you, okay, let's go ahead and switch from squares to hexes. Was there anything that came up during development that you realized, hey, this is also an advantage for having hexes as opposed to squares that you didn't initially anticipate?
There was a big disadvantage that we came across that we never thought about. And the use of memory on a square map is perfect because when you lay out the coordinate system on a square map, every tile is accounted for in a nice 10,000 by 10,000 grid or whatever size that your map is. Every block takes up an area of memory, and it all perfectly uses that space. On a hex-based map, you have odd areas at the edges of those maps since they're not square, which are areas that the computer is still calculating out. out those edges, the 0, 0 on the coordinate, the 0, 1 on the coordinate system, but aren't actually used in game. So you end up having some areas in memory that are being used even though they're not giving any gameplay impact. So it was less efficient from a memory model than square maps were. We never looked at that. It wasn't a huge deal. Like I say, we're on 64-bit, so memory is not as much of a concern. We're not fighting for every K.
Actually, as you were describing that, was there like a small voice on the team saying, "Aren't you glad we went to 64-bit?"
That came up many, many, many times. I can't tell you how many times in previous projects you've been like, oh, yeah, we'd love to do that. That would be so cool. But, yeah, that's going to cost us another 50 meg of RAM, and that's not possible. We're already running out on some systems and late games. And if you want to do that, if you want to add in that thing that uses 50 meg of RAM, you're going to add those new buildings in there. Well, then you're going to have to cut something somewhere else to make it happen. And that's just really tough to do.
And to relate back briefly to Civ at Firaxicon last fall, there was a comment from Sid, the gentleman at Firaxis who was interviewing him. I can't remember his name right now. And they were essentially making the comment that throughout the development of games, it's like, well, we know the game is done when we filled up the memory.
That would be a problem with GalCiv. Oh my gosh, we'd be in such trouble. Just to put a little context around that, we were playing 32-bit versions of our games. 32-bit has access to X amount of memory. A 33-bit operating system would have access to double what a 32-bit can because it'd have that extra 0 to work with. A 34-bit system would have double what a 33 can. So when you talk about the jump from 32-bit to 64-bit, you're not talking about twice as much memory. You're talking about more memory than I have to do the capability to do math, more than your computer can hold by any stretch of the imagination, and by any time in the near future. So I think that's really cool. It is virtually limitless. And I say this full well knowing that Bill Gates said you'll never need more than 640K, 20 years.
Yeah, no.
But it is a huge jump.
So what you're saying is that GalCiv 3 may never be done. Because you'll never use the full... Oh, no, that's not what you're saying.
No,
okay.
No. Although Paul Boyer is the lead designer for GalCiv, and one of the things that's kind of cool is at a lot of companies, you would have somebody that makes a successful game, and they'd be like, all right, I've been living GalCiv for 3 years now. I'm ready to go off and do something else. And Paul is exactly the opposite of that. Paul will be the first guy to tell you, I want to do GalCiv for the rest of my life. That's all I got. I have ideas for expansions. I have ideas for the next version of GalCiv. I just want to live and breathe GalCiv. And Paul's been here for 12 years. He was involved in GalCivs forever. It's not like this is something he's going to burn out on.
The technology tree. We know that there are 3 broad ages for GalCiv 3's technology tree: expansion, war, and ascension. What is the intent behind them, and how does that influence or even drive the gameplay? And with that, is there any comparison to, say, Beyond Earth and its nonlinear tech tree, which features the affinities that we mentioned before: harmony, purity, supremacy?
That's a great question. I'm so glad you brought that up because Paul's the lead designer for the game. It is his baby for certain. That's one of the few things I had some input on. Where that came from was we were sitting and talking about the technology tree and GalCiv, and we had a problem because we didn't want GalCiv to have a linear tech tree. And by a linear tech tree, I mean the Civilization 4 or 5 style, where basically by the time you get to the end of tech tree, 80% of the techs you went through, you had to have hit. It kind of doesn't let you vary too much as compared to a pyramid tech tree, which is you can go to any end tech that you want to and pick the path to it, and you can completely ignore the rest of the tech tree. GalCiv 2 always had a pyramid tech tree, and one of the problems with that is you can race down for the super uber weapon and have it on turn 60. That's all the way down. That's supposed to be there for the end game. Now you have these big killer doom ray weapons that you're not supposed to have on turn 60, and trying to balance that against, well, yeah, but that means that, you passed up the ability to improve your planets and being able to terraform new worlds and your life support system so your ships could travel further. You had to bypass all those things. It was really kind of hard to balance. And so we came up with the tech aegis for that, where we still wanted the pyramid-shaped tree because we wanted people to be able to deep dive into specifically what they wanted to and not feel like they were kind of being led down a singular path. And we also wanted every time you play the game for it to be dramatically different. So now I really focused on the diplomacy tree, and I was really working on making my alliances better. And next time I play, I'm really going to focus on colonized worlds better and better by getting all those upgrades. We wanted people to be able to specialize like that, but we needed to put some controls in there to say, but you can't just deep dive to that late game on turn 60. So what we said was, all right, we're going to have technological ages, which means you can't get into that second age until you've researched at least 20 techs. Whatever those 20 techs are in the first age, that's up to you. It doesn't matter. You just do 20 techs, and then you can dive in and you can start getting those mid-game techs. And then after you've had, I don't know what the exact number is, something like 50 techs total learned in the game, then we're going to let you get to those late game techs.
I mean, a lot of the tech tree of GalCiv 3 is the same least in style and probably a lot of competitiveness with Galciv 2. But some of those changes, especially late beta 6, switching from having choice text where you can have one of 3, where before you could just take all 3, switching that over to actually you just have to pick one. I noticed that did cause a bit of a kerfuffle on the forums. But
it did. Yeah, so we had specializations there, right? So when you pick this tech, there's actually 3 versions of it. One of the versions may make all of your engine systems a little cheaper. One of the versions may make them more powerful, and one of the versions may reduce maintenance costs on them. This tech definitely has to do with improving your engine systems, but the way that you're particularly going to do that, you have to pick when you research that tech. Just like you say, prior to beta 6, relatively late in the beta process, you could go back. So you could pick one, and then you could go back and pick the other, and then you could go back and pick the third if you wanted to, and then you'd have all 3 of those advantages. From our perspective, that wasn't ideal because it meant that there was less specialization, less replayability. I want you to make a choice there. Strategy games are all about making hard choices. I want you to want all 3 of those, or Paul wanted you to want all 3 of those, but have to make a hard choice about which one you were going to do this time when you played. Maybe next time when you played, you'd come back and do it a little differently. But he wanted to lock you into your choices and have them affect for the rest of the game. Where if you could come do it 3 times, then you could do that every time you played, and it would always be the same. The other big advantage is to locking you down to one of those options is you can tech trade with other AI players, and they could have unlocked a different option there. So one way that you could get reduced maintenance on your engines and longer range from your engines is to trade with AI player or another human player that had chosen another branch. And that made diplomacy a lot more powerful because now in the diplomacy tree, you can get things that you don't have access to anymore.
Okay, so tying into both actually the technology tree and back in the sandbox question, when you talked about you could have this game yourself and 99 other empires in the universe.
There are 8 factions that you start the game with, and then you have the ability to create custom factions. So you can create as many custom factions as you want to. We have an in-game editor. You do that right in the UI. So you can make whoever you want to play as. Or the really cool thing is when you create a custom faction, not only do you give it all the traits and abilities you want to have, I want to have increased production. These guys are despised by the rest of the galaxy, so they get a diplomacy penalty. They have a special ability where they get a free improvement on every planet that they colonize, whatever those things are. You also have the ability to go in and set their AI settings. So you can say, listen, when the AI plays these guys, this doesn't affect how you as a human player would play them. But when the AI plays these guys, I want them to be cruel and I want them to be opportunistic. And then you can also set here all the kind of focuses that the AI has. It can focus on growth. It can focus on research. It can focus on military or defense. And you can order those to say, okay, I think the most important thing for this faction when the AI plays it is they're going to put research number 1. And after that, they're going to go for approval and then diplomacy and then growth. And way down at the bottom, it's going to be military and defense because they don't care about those things. And then I'm going to make another custom faction and I'm going to change all those values around. And that way, if you make 10 custom factions, make as many as you want, and you go into a game where you're playing against them, the AI is going to play those factions dramatically different from each other.
So when you talk about a really large game where you've got like 100 civilizations, are you in your mind thinking of that the player has created a lot of these as opposed to, half a dozen copies of the same civilization that comes with the base game?
You can do it either way. I have a mod on my computer that has 100 factions on it, and they are dramatically different from each other. And I have all of my favorite base species in there. So I have the Weeping Angels from Doctor Who, and I have a couple factions from Star Control. I always tell everybody I have the best version of Galciv ever. But yeah, I'm expecting the player would make a lot of these. There are mods out there. Right now we're hooking up Steam Workshop support. So that'll be coming in a later patch so that players can just go out to Steam Workshop and they say, oh, I like those factions. I'm going to put those in my game. Or I like those ship designs. I'm going to put those in my game. All of this variety of people to play against.
Yeah, that's one thing from Galciv 2 that was definitely a little sad. With Galciv 2 and obviously Galciv 3, you can design your own spaceships from components. So there's no flat, this is your ship. You build it from scratch, so you can have weird flying things. But one of the worst part was there were some people who knew how to take the time to learn how to design it well so it looked good. And then there was other people who were just like, well, I put all the components on it. Of course it flies, right?
I don't have the gift to be able to make those cool looking ships. I've gone in there and it's really fun to play with and you can create an amazing variety of stuff, but I have no artistic skill and they end up looking a little wonky to me. Then I see what other players are doing out on the forums and pictures they're putting up on Steam and it's amazing. So it'd be really cool to be able to easily bring those into my game and to use their really cool ships.
Whatever you design actually gets rendered in-game, unlike many other games, which is really nice. So you can make the crazy-looking thing and actually see it in-game.
Yeah, one of the things that Paul said, speaking of our triple X rated games, it's one of the things Paul said, and it's one of his first preview articles that he did right when we announced the game with PC Gamer, is they asked about ship customization. Will Gal Civ 3 have ship customization in it? And Paul said, oh yeah, you can look forward to seeing a wide variety of penis-shaped ships in the future.
Yep.
And that made it into the magazine article. It was in there. And sure enough, when PC Gamer came out, their ship that they had there was obviously a gigantic penis that they had created in the ship editor.
That makes you first off think of Spore and creature creation.
Yeah.
But also, do you get like a lot of people that say, thank you so much for this customized ship creation because it makes us think so much, and Mackie's going to love me for this reference, Alpha Centauri Unit Workshop.
Yeah, it's a little bit different than Alpha Centauri's. Alpha Centauri's was completely functional. I pick my base. This is a hovercraft or this is a four-wheeled vehicle, and then I put these things on it, and that's my customization. Where Gal Civ absolutely has the components I'm putting in. I'm going to put a missile right here, but you get to choose 3 missiles, launchers, and they're going to be right underneath the bay where the pilot would sit. And then I'm going to have wings that come out here, but you can create such an incredible variety. We have guys that have battleships out there. They've made the Millennium Falcon. They've made amazing Cthulhu-looking ships with tentacles. You can set pieces to rotate and move. So we have people with transformer robots in space and that actually transform, and giant Gundam robots with swords. And I don't know how they're doing it as compared to an Alpha Centauri where it was more of just from a gameplay standpoint of A plus B plus C equals this cool thing that I made.
Yeah, now the difference, well, like with Alpha Centauri, you get given the base. It's like, oh, I want to make a hovercraft. Well, okay, here's the base. In Gal Civ, you get, well, I have a tiny little box. What do I add to that to make the hovercraft in the first place?
Yeah. One of the reasons the modding side of Gal Civ was so important to me is because that's where I come from. I created Fall from Heaven mod for Civilization. I was lucky enough to be able to work on Beyond the Sword with Firaxis. Great people over there. So coming to Stardock, that was something that was very near and dear to my heart. That, what can modders do with this? How can they change this? How can they make the game their own? How can they make the game unique to them? And I'm so glad to see that come to fruition in Gal Civ.
What would you say to people wondering about the diplomacy system in Galactic Civilizations, especially when probably in the first thing when they heard about all these different empires that you could have, whether they're customized by you or just multiple copies of the civs that come with the base game or a combination thereof? People might be thinking about Civilization 5 and how diplomacy was, and it got a little better with the expansion packs, and then we got Beyond Earth and it was like somebody was cooking something and they forgot to add salt. How is diplomacy fleshed out in Gal Civ 3, and how does that work with the sandbox as well as back to the technology tree? Because you made mention of diplomacy in relation to the tech tree.
Yes, there's a diplomacy branch of the tech tree that you can specialize in. I love the diplomacy system in Gal Civ 3 because there's a lot of flavor. There's a lot of different tags that can be used. Brad, in particular, he has an AI programmer here that he works with, and Brad will give him functional things that he needs. Hey, give me a function that does this, this, and this, because I'm going to play with the AI, and I'm going to make it use those things. For people that don't know, Brad Wardell is the CEO of the company. He's also an AI programmer, and he is the AI programmer for Gal Civ 3. So there may be another.
He was on the episode 228.
Thank you for mentioning that, Matt. I noticed Derek wasn't going to mention that at all. It's like the most important point.
Okay. He was on an episode of this show, and then second to that, he's owned Stardock. The company's been around for 22 years now.
You said he was on an episode of the show because you couldn't remember the number we just did.
228. I got it.
The one right before this one.
Wait, when was this one again?
Brad likes to have lots of reasons the AI can come up and talk to the human player. And this is really, whenever I talk to anybody who played Gal Civ 2, so I'd get people to come up, oh, I love Gal Civ 2, looking forward to the new game. I'd always ask them, what did you like? And they would always say one of two things. It was either the ship designer or two, the way the AI. And a lot of times what they meant when they said they loved the AI, it wasn't the difficulty of the AI, although it did a pretty good job there. It was about the way that the AI interacted with a human. So Brad will put in tags to say, I want the AI to be looking and noticing things like you're massing ships up on its borders. And it's going to come up and tell you, I see what you're doing. And I know what you're about ready to do, and I'm getting ready for it. Because it's different from a lot of games where the AI may even notice that the human player is building up units on its borders.
Oh, like in Civilization 5, it's like, oh, I see your units on your borders. Are you going to declare war, or are you just passing through?
Lots of those kind of conversation starters in Gal Civ, so you can actually feel like you're having a real conversation. These are real players who are playing this game. The neat thing about it for all of the factions in there is if you go into the flavor text file, all of the factions that we supply with the game all have unique ways of handling those conversations. So if you're talking to the Yor, which is this synthetic race of metal, they're going to talk to you much differently than talking to the Drengen or the Altarians. They all have different views and different ways that they talk about those things. If you don't match any of those factions specifically, there are some tags in there depending on what the ideology of that faction is. That's another thing that you set up when you create a custom faction. So these guys are benevolent, these guys are pragmatic, or whatever that ideology is. So if I create 10 custom factions and I give them different ideologies, they will say different things when I'm talking to them. They have different goals. If none of those match, then there's also just some generic qualifiers that they will say for each of those things.
I played it this way in Galciv 2 and play it the same way in Galciv 3 is really the AIs are just there to boost my tech base. All they do is tech trade. And much of the other stuff for diplomacy is pretty thin. I hate tech trading with a passion. So I was kind of sad to see it still stick in there.
It is. We actually have tags for the individual techs to say things like, the AI will never trade this. So, and we put that on some of the higher level weapons and defense, but it's an XML tag, so you could mod it if you wanted to, and it gives Paul complete control over it. So he can set both how much the AI values those particular techs. I think that's a really good one, so I'm going to make you pay a lot for it, or nope, he's never going to give you the tech that allows you to core detonate planets. He's never trading that away, but you're right. There's a lot of power in that system, so you have to be really careful with how you use it.
Anytime you allow that kind of free tech trading, you get hundreds and hundreds, maybe even 1,000% multiplier on what your effective tech base would be otherwise, and it's just ridiculous. Basically, if you have a well-designed research model in the game where you have to invest into your science, having something on the scale of tech trade just bypasses its relevance to such a large extent.
When you start a game, one of the options in the game options is to disable tech trading. So if that is something you wouldn't like in your game, it's right there in your game options, you disable that, and then it's not doable anymore.
Galciv 3, multiplayer capable. Why MP support now, and what are your hopes for it?
The hope is, of course, that that's a way that people enjoy playing the games. Again, this was something that was hotly debated while we were in development. The people that were thinking, well, this isn't worth the development costs would argue that, for one, it's a huge cost. The code is so much simpler. The use cases are so much simpler. It's so much easier for a QA department if the single player is the only way to play the game. One of the questions we come up with is it takes 8 hours to play a game of Galciv. How many people want to get together with their friends and play a game together for 8 hours? How many?
Every single weekend. Literally every single weekend.
Yeah, pretty much. And
sorry, continue.
The other side of the argument argued that there are those weird people out there that do things like that.
Hey, that's Mr. Weird to you.
I resemble that remark.
I would also point out that in this day and age, with internet connections being so cheap and easy, that having a single-player only game where you really have to hope that your AI developer actually knows what they're doing completely to keep people playing again, multiplayer is the only real way to get people to consistently stay, because then people can fight other people and not have to care whether or not the AI was programmed well.
Yeah, I don't know. I look at all the people that are playing Civilization 5 since its release in 2010. I mean, it's just a phenomenal amount of people that are still playing that game every day. And I suspect that a huge percentage of them are playing single player.
Yeah, because multiplayer's broke. We all know that.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, we all know that. It's not as broken as it used to be.
Okay.
We had to help Brad on the last episode because he talked about Galciv 3 multiplayer being like Civ 5 multiplayer on release, and Magin said, so, you intend it to be broken.
Oh, man, the vanilla state of Civ 5 MP was...
Yeah.
Oh, Jesus.
It was so bad.
It's not great now, but compared to then...
Now, granted, to be fair, the multiplayer programmers at Firaxis had left before Civ 5 came out.
This is true.
So it took until after it came out when they finally got another Brad to show up to come do multiplayer.
And of course, we did side with the multiplayer is both important because there's lots of people that enjoy playing the game that way. It will get more people into and playing the game because we'll have people that go and get their friends, hey, get a copy of this game because I want somebody to play with, as well as the fact that Galciv is a long-term brand for us. So even if we decided that in 2015 there wouldn't be enough sales to justify all the expense and time and effort it took to put in a multiplayer, in 2016 and 2017 to 2018, that investment will pay off. Multiplayer is one of these things that you can't put in an expansion. You can't develop a single-player game and then come put multiplayer into it 6 months later. It's not new function. It is a re-architecture of the way the entire game works. So for us, it was we're either doing this now or we're never doing it, and that's why we decided, listen, let's do it. Let's invest everything we have into making this the best version of Galciv ever. We know players have been asking for this in Galciv, so let's do it. Let's do it here.
It's much better that there is multiplayer than not.
I have a GalCiv stream every Friday where Paul gets on and shows the game and talks to the community.
I mean, you could say there was multiplayer before where you could sit at the same computer and you play one turn of a single-player game, and then your friend plays another turn. That's multiplayer, right? That's like a hot seat, only even worse than hot seat, of which there is no hot seat in GalCiv 3, because I read on the official site that there didn't just seem to be an interest enough in that to put resources into that, which made complete sense to me.
Yeah, I don't see a lot of that, or play by email anymore. You remember the old ways we used to do these games. We don't see too much of that.
No, Civ without play by email or some sort of pitbot server, people get pissed. They did, actually, for a while until it got added in.
It's true. What I really am hoping for, and you talked about having a conversation with AI, Derek. So we're not quite at the point where, for example, I can put on my headset and I can talk to the leader of Yore and say, "Fuck you, rusty bucket of bolts."
Yeah.
No, you can't.
I mean, I can, but they won't respond, right?
It's interesting. That is something that Brad would love to see. It hasn't been put in at this point, of course, and it's not there. But one of the dreams, it's kind of an interesting relationship. Brad is the creator of GalCiv. He's the owner of the company. But Paul's a lead designer for the game, so Brad will talk a lot about, hey, I think these things would be really cool. And at the end of the day, Paul makes the decision what's going to happen, what's going to not. He takes, of course, Brad's opinion very strongly. He's the owner of the company. You're gonna listen when Brad says something.
I had this there. Hey, Paul, do you think? No.
No.
Paul,
not
back to your room. Go work more.
But Brad has talked about that numerous times, where he would love to see the ability to just have a discussion with the AI players and give the player a couple options to just be a jerk to them or to be kind to them, and that may pay off either in the ideology system. We do this a little bit in our campaign, where when you start the campaign, your commander comes up and says, hey, you need to go retake this planet. We lost this planet to the Drengen. It's on the outskirts of their empire. Go take it. And you have the option to either say, yes, sir, right on it, or you can be kind of a jerk about it. And the decisions you make in that conversation affect your ideology. So you get points in pragmatic or benevolent, kind of like the affinity system in Beyond Earth. And the more points you get, you can unlock new abilities. But we don't have anything like that in the sandbox game. But Brad's also very big on that. He thinks that'd be really cool to add.
And if there's anyone out there thinking, Dan, this is a terrible idea, look, there's all this memory that GalCiv 3 can use and it doesn't use. And if you don't use it, you lose it. So I'm actually helping you.
Yes, right, we will convince Brad to allow for natural language processing inside the game.
Well.
So Derek will return to PolyCast in 2018, where he announces the Galactic Civilization 3 expansion, Yo Mama. He's not disagreeing.
I was just thinking, Brad and I were playing GalCiv 1, I think it was, because we were just sitting there. This is a couple weeks before GalCiv 3 released, and we were sitting at his desk and kind of playing through and looking at different things like, oh, yeah, that's cool. And, oh, yeah, that idea kind of got dropped and never went any further than this. Or just kind of looking back at the inspiration of GalCiv.
Aww.
And one of the diplomacy things that came up was something like, you're an ass. I mean, it literally said that. Brad's like, oh, my gosh, I can't believe I put that in the game. Absolutely cussed at the player for doing something. Like, oh, wow. It was a different time.
It's just the auto-translator kicking back the English response.
Yeah, the universal translator gives you the proper response.
Yeah. Or it's broken.
Your female parental unit has intaked too many calories.
Oh!
You really are going to roll out Yo Mama.
Space isn't empty. It's waiting. How will you rule your galaxy?
Call in today. In North America, the number is 301-637-7659.
That's 301-637-POLY.
In Europe, 44121-288-7659. That's 44121-288-POLY.
The only thing worse than being talked about is not being talked about.
For more information on PolyCast,
our sibling shows Modcast, Revcast, and Turncast,
or about PolyCast in general,
log on to the series' official website at thepolycast.net.
You guys should get some cameras on here so everybody can see your faces when we're talking.
Oh. I have to get up on a Saturday morning anyway. Can I just please sit here with no makeup and stuff and not have to worry about that? Thanks.
Me too.
The crack of 11, huh? Or at least a little bit before that to get ready.
And I'd like to be sleeping longer on a Saturday. Yes, that is early.
I just set my alarm, actually, and I have an hour for it. That's okay, though.
Stardock is based in Michigan, so we have some pretty horrible winters sometimes. You guys are Canadian, so you know. Some of you are Canadian, so you know.
I'm not Canadian. I live in Florida.
Yeah, I'm just getting floods, right?
You were making a connection between the winters in Michigan and makeup.
Yes.
Continue.
So we had a really bad winter, so everybody was working from home from Stardock that day. And one of the ladies that works in marketing pinged me on Skype, because we all live on Skype, to see if she could ask me some questions. I said, sure, go ahead and call. And she did, and what she didn't realize was if you're on Skype with somebody and you hit call and you both have webcams on your computer, so all I see is the webcam come up and I see her sitting there. She's wearing her pajamas. She hasn't put her makeup on. She's nothing embarrassing at that, but just her reaction as, you know.
She realized the webcam was like, ah!
I know, and then she immediately dropped down behind her desk in complete shame.
Just call him back with audio only. Oh my god!
Why wouldn't you just end the call and be like, just a sec?
No, what you're saying is her face was naked.
Her face was naked. Yes, it was.
Yes.
Okay, all right, naked face. Okay.
If we go to the video format, I'll just cheat and put pictures of other things there instead.
Well, just print out the troll face is what you do. And
well, no, that's my real face, though.
Uh-huh.
My cat will just co-host from that point on.
I think it makes most sense to go into the closing at this point.
All right, get out of here.
It's not your turn, Magin.
Wait, is that the budget closing? We're having to make some cuts?
I love that.
Shoo, you.
I thought that was great.
No, I'll do it properly. Thank you, everyone, for joining us on episode 229 of PolyCast. I am the Mean Team, and today I was joined by regular co-hosts Dan Q.
Closing time. One last call for... Oh, wait, no. That's not what we're doing.
Makalua.
I thought we were doing the whole thing about the tide is high and we're holding on.
Magin.
All right, time to go play some more Witcher 3.
And,
wait, what song is that from?
Yeah, what song is that? You don't know how to play this game, do you?
And guest co-host, Kale. Or, Dirk.
Thank you very much for having me. It's been a great time.
But just as a preview, the first question for Galciv 3 will be, if Galciv 3 were a tree, what kind of tree would it be?
Oh.
You really should prepare for that. I know, it's kind of meta, but...
Okay. I'm doomed.
So you remember that detail, but you don't remember to listen to the episode after it's released.
I don't think I did listen to it after. I was on the episode. I heard it live.
See, what you didn't hear was all the stuff we said afterwards.
All the stuff my statements were edited into. I will have to listen to this one with all the comments.
You know, there wouldn't be so many comments if you didn't make them.
Entirely out of context, I say.
Hey, Phil.
Hi.
All right, I guess I got to phone Mackie.
Sounds like my kind of conversation.
We've already gone off the rails. We haven't even started the episode yet.
We had
that's
rails.
par for the course.
All right, we should be streaming now. Actually,
Did Kale run away with his...
Did I?
I don't know.
Phil and Mackie have no idea what we're talking about.
You waited until Dan said, we are streaming now, and then boom, there goes the statement.
Of course.
Well, luckily for you, he'll edit this later, and nobody will know except the 5 people that actually showed up to the stream.
No.
We have 5
Everybody
people
will
on
know
this.
about Kale's.
Any statements that sound like me that were taken from before the show started are completely made up by Dan. I just want to put that out there right now.
It'll sound
it's all
exactly
fancy
like
editing.
him.
Now, speaking of editing, that statement you just gave, Derek, that's being cut.
Of course.
Yes, this is Kale that we're talking to, Derek Paxton. Because some people might just think, oh, that Kale guy, whatever happened to him? That's what happened to him.
And that's
we're talking to
He
him right
got
now.
a job.
He went corporate.
You sell out.
The modding. 229?
The one on the Skype chat.
It says 228 there.
No?
The other chat.
The other Skype chat, yeah.
No, the one we're on the live call for.
Oh, I see. The last thing on this is episode 228, so that's what I saw.
Don't worry, ladies and gentlemen. Derek doesn't have to know which window is up when he's designing games.
That's right.
Okay, it's okay.
Code just goes in random windows.
This would explain so much.
Why can't the Starbase work? Oh, this is Pac-Man. Oh, shoot.
Do you have the Klingons without the forehead ridges and the Klingons with the forehead ridges?
I don't have anything from Star Trek. I don't think is currently in.
Get off the show.
Oh, man.
It is nice. The buying of the AI's ships has been removed a little bit. You know, being able to buy all their ships just before you declare war on them, then you get all their ships. That was in there until at least Beta 5.
I won't buy your planets because I'm going to get those here in a minute.
Yeah, exactly.
Any other questions for Derek from Mackie or Phil? Because I think Matt and I have asked a lot.
I think you guys have got all the good questions there, so.
Yeah.
All right, ask a bad question.
So what is your obsession with...
Oh.
Record date May 30th, 2015. Galactic Civilization 3 clips, copyright Stardock Systems. Civilization 4, 5, and Beyond Earth sound clips, copyright Take-Two Interactive. Copyright Civilized Communication at civcom.net.